This is the You Winning Life Podcast, your number one source for mastering a positive existence. Each episode, we'll be interviewing exceptional people, giving you empowering insights, and guiding you to extraordinary outcomes. Learn from specialists in the worlds of integrative and natural wellness, spirituality, psychology, and entrepreneurship, so you too can be winning life. Now, here's your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified Neuro emotional technique practitioner, and certified entrepreneur coach, Jason Wasser.
All right, welcome back to the You Winning Life podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be hanging out with someone who is in the world that I am super passionate about. If you know anything about what my private practice has done, the Family Room Wellness Associates, we've gone beyond the traditional therapy and moved more into integrative mind-body wellness. And that also includes the modality called Neuro emotional technique, which originally came out of chiropractic, as you may have heard in previous episodes. And today, I am going to be sharing some time with a practitioner who goes off into another part of the world of integrative wellness that I love, which is functional medicine and chiropractic. So today I have Dr. Kylie Burton. She is obviously a chiropractor and functional medicine practitioner. And she has graduated with Doctorate of Chiropractic, a certificate in functional medicine from the Functional Medicine University, which is an incredible online program for practitioners. And we're going to get into some really cool topics. So thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm super excited to share this alternative world known as functional medicine. Some people understand it and some people don't. So when you hear the term functional medicine, just think about why. When you go to your doctor and you say, well, why am I not pregnant? Why is my thyroid still struggling? Why am I still experiencing depression symptoms, even though I'm on some SSRI? And they always don't really have a very clear response for you because they're not trained. And it's not that your doctor's doing their best that they can to try to help you, but the toolkit that they have is very limited. If you don't fall underneath an umbrella, so if your symptoms don't fall underneath an umbrella, they can't give you a diagnosis, and therefore they can't give you a pill to, quote, manage your symptoms, right?
Yeah.
But functional medicine dives into the whole why. Then once you figure out the why, you can then figure out the right treatment plan to resolve symptoms, and so people can get their lives back, whatever that back means, whether it's you being an energetic mom, whether it's you having time to make dinner, or you're being a grandma and actually wanting to go spend time with your grandkids because you know how exhausting it is, or if it's you simply wanting to become a mom and get pregnant for the first or third time, whatever the case may be. So that's where my passion lies. And the funny thing is I actually grew up all in Western medicine. You got sick, you went and got an antibiotic, and that was just life. Like when I was 18 years old, I was a senior in high school, I was on 9 different medications. Wow. And that's just what we knew. So we didn't know anything different. I didn't even know what chiropractic was my senior year of high school.
Or that chiropractors could eventually do any of this stuff as well.
Yeah.
Right? That this was part of their purview.
You know, when I got introduced to it, it was like, oh, they crack backs and they crack necks, that's it. And in reality, chiropractors are some of the best doctors in the world. And if I were to go back and do everything again, I would go DO and still specialize in the functional medicine, but just the DO gives you more leverage in this culture. DCs, chiropractors are like, oh, well, you just crack necks and backs. I'm like, actually, I don't even own a table. I do all functional medicine. So It's my passion, and I'm super happy to share it with you today.
So let's unpackage a little bit of what you just said, because a lot of what you shared sounds like you're focusing in more on women's health. But as we're talking, because I know we're going to get into some topics about women's health, but a lot of this also applies to those who are not women, because we're going to get into stress handling. We're going to get into supporting your partner if they are going through this stuff, or if you're going through this stuff yourself. So even though some of the things we might be talking about today might be tackling more from a women's health perspective, but those of you who are partners to someone who are listening to this episode and might be like, wow, this might be what my partner's going through, or they are going through this, or some of these signs and symptoms are showing up, but there's never been a diagnosis, so to speak, or there hasn't been, a down the rabbit hole approach to solving these problems, pay attention, because we're going to unpackage a lot of good stuff today. So let's start off at the top of this, the food chain of everything going on, right? We're in the holiday season. It's the end of 2020. And although this episode may not be released until a little bit later on, but some of the things that people are going through right now, right? We're midway, if not hopefully near the end of this pandemic, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of tons of political toxic crisis going on around us. We're in a very big upheaval. And most of us are used to like one crisis at a time. And now we're really juggling, like, which do we have our time, effort, and energy to get into? And one of the words you used a few minutes ago, or phrases, was adrenal fatigue. And right, the one that's, kind of alluded to that. So let's start there, right? We're in this holiday season, a lot going on. Do we see our family? Do we not see our family? Is this stuff real? Is this not stuff real? Do I follow this science? Do I follow this science? What are some of those tips right off the bat that you're giving to your clients right now as we're going into this winter season?
For me, I harp on vitamin D. Vitamin D is like one of the best and easiest things that you can take. That's totally going to curb any anxiety and any depression. I know you're in Florida. I'm in Utah, where we're entering winter season. It's cold. I mean, it's 30 degrees outside, and seasonal depression is a big issue too. So most people say, oh, well, I take vitamin D. Well, how much do you take? I think I take like 2,000 IUs. That's a great place to start, but it's not going to help you feel good. It's not going to give your body what it needs to actually curb that anxiety and to curb that depression. The way I tell people is, we're going to jack it up. That's one of the very first things that we do, because you get such quick benefits so fast simply off of this one vitamin.
Yep.
So my protocol, which I would love to share with you and your listeners, is I do 25,000 IUs of vitamin D per day. Now, IU is just the way that they measure it. So if you were to go pull your vitamin D from your shelf, look at the serving size, it will say IUs on it. That's what I mean when I'm saying IUs. So 25,000 per day for a month. Then 20,000 per day for a month, down to 15,000 for a month, down to 10,000. You probably want to maintain more at that 10,000. Now, you're in Miami, right?
Yeah.
Or just outside of Miami.
Yeah, just in that area. Mm-hmm.
The sunshine is very bright all year long. And I have people even from the Caribbean who are like, well, I live in the Caribbean. I'm outside all day long. But yet my vitamin D levels are 28. They're extremely low, and I can feel it. Why is that possible? How is that possible when I'm out in the sun all the time? And the reality is that sunshine has to go through so much crap to get to your body. And now our bodies are constantly fighting and dealing with other stuff from the environment that it's not very efficient in making vitamin D anymore.
Agreed. So it's interesting, right? That vitamin D, and this is one of the things that I talk to every single one of my clients, and I try to make sure that they're all on it right off the bat. And even though, like you were just saying, we are more exposed to sun here in the South Florida area, right, or in the Caribbean area, below the equator, right, and below the, right, I mean, or at least getting closer and closer to the equator, excuse me, right? I haven't found, I would say 99% of my clients, when I've looked at their labs, have low vitamin D. I've seen one client who has not just normal levels, but according to the functional medicine numbers, and what I say by functional medicine numbers, for those of you who are not familiar, is that they tighten up the numbers a little bit and they kind of streamline it in order to say, like, these things in this lab are not one-offs, that they're not disconnected from everything else. But if you have this number showing up here, you want to look to these other places to see how it cross-references. But when they talk about within normal limits, you're talking about the average, so to speak, the average American. And unfortunately, the average American is, like you were saying, like when you were in college or on multiple medication, they're eating not healthy food, the standard American diet or the SAD diet. They're eating junk food. They're eating high processed foods, sugars, high fructose corn syrup, fake sugar, stuff like that. So therefore, even if you are living in South Florida and you're out in the sun, you may not be able to assimilate it, like, because, right, your gut can't absorb it. You might have other issues going on. Magnesium deficiency is one of the reasons why people might have a vitamin D, right? They're not able to absorb their vitamin D even if they're taking it. I'm one of those people. So this is a huge, huge thing. And in fact, there's a practitioner that I'm not sure if you've heard of, Dr. Alex Vasquez. And he is like the Mac Daddy, apparently, on all vitamin D. And here's the interesting thing that I found while you're talking about this, and I'm so excited because I haven't been able to talk to someone about this on an episode before, is that even for men, the vitamin D effects are so powerful when you have deficiency that they're finding a significant contribution and connection to erectile dysfunction with vitamin D deficiency.
Really,
which is, we can go with the joke of maybe that's why it's called vitamin D, but it's but so now, like, anybody I'm seeing who's having any for sexual health challenges, I'm saying, let's check your numbers, right? But majority of my clients, I've had one client with optimal vitamin D levels in the last 4 years. And I see a lot of people who have darker skin tone than we do, right? They're either from the Black community, Afro-Caribbean community, and I have them all like loaded up because they're highly more susceptible right now to the pandemic, as we see by the research. And I'm wondering, from your perspective as a practitioner of this, does the skin tone, like, depending on someone's ability to absorb the sun, also depends on your skin tone? So is that why we're seeing, like, why those, the client of yours from the Caribbean might have lower vitamin D, may not just be a gut issue, but it can also be a skin absorption issue?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a redhead, pale as a ghost, and I can get it quite easily because I haven't really dove into why, but I guess, like, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, it would take me like 15 minutes to get it from the sun versus somebody else with darker skin who would need it more for like an hour.
Right.
Now, like I said, I go out to the sun, I go outside and it's 30 degrees outside. I'm completely bundled up. And I've gone to Chicago in March, and literally people are walking down the streets and the only things you can see are their eyeballs because it's so cold.
Yeah.
So you might be bundling up, and if you're not allowing the skin to see that sunshine, then you're not going to get it as well.
Yeah. So I know we definitely want to come back to that, and I'm sure we might come back to vitamin D, but that's number one, right? Everybody needs to make sure, check your vitamin D levels, right? So they're talking about, with what's going on in the world, anything below 40 is considered very threatening to your health and well-being as it goes and relates to the pandemic. And there's tons and tons of research on that out there. And we'll link that in the show notes, especially some research that I found the other day that shows, like, it's a 50% increase in morbidity and, God forbid, death risks if your vitamin D is below 40 as it relates to what's going on in the pandemic right now.
Yeah, I try to get patients up above 80.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen, when you first pull labs, I pull medical records because they've already had labs taken, so might as well use it and actually get answers from it instead of just being told that you're normal and go along on your way. I've never seen anybody in that optimal range, and for me, it's between 80 and 100, except for one person, and that one person who had been doing my vitamin D protocol for the last 3 months. From me preaching it on Facebook, she's like, I feel so much better. I'm like, well, look, your vitamin D is 108. That's awesome. And what did you do? She's like, I've just been listening to you and doing what you said.
Right.
Whereas before it was, 45 or something like that, but still within, quote, normal range. So the physician didn't do anything about it. And now she's telling me that her symptoms of SAD are gone. The anxiety is totally curbed. And yeah, it's from just simply taking vitamin D. And not only does vitamin D help with our immune system, but it can help mitigate stress and who knows whatever else, because vitamin D is like required for every single pathway in the body. Right. Every single chemical reaction that's happening, you need some vitamin D.
Yeah. And those of you who are now thinking about, like, okay, I need to get some vitamin D into my system, you want to make sure that it also has vitamin K, because that across, a bioavailable vitamin makes the body assimilate it significantly better. So you want to make sure you get that vitamin D with the vitamin K together.
Right. And eat it with food too.
And eat it with food, right? Most likely more fatty foods, right? Because that helps the absorption. Yeah. So cool. So that's number one. So what's another thing off the top of your head, like just right now, that we can be right for? I mean, again, stress handling is huge, and stress affects everything, especially our gut, right? And how we're digesting and processing everything. Because how, I see what's going on in the world with the difficult, like, how can we digest all of this? Like, it's too big of a bite, too many things on the plate.
Turn it off.
Yeah.
Turn the TV off, turn the radio off, throw on some music. I mean, I don't pay attention to it because I literally just say, I don't have energy to put into this stuff. I have so much amount of energy, and it's got to go into my kids, helping my patients, the business side of things. Like, I'm a mom, a doctor, a wife, a entrepreneur. I have all these hats I have to wear. I'm not dumping energy into that. And so I've totally just separated it. If it comes on, I'm trying to watch an athletic game, which I love sports. I used to be a sports addict. But when you go into chiropractic school and you're taking 35 credits at a time, you don't have time for sports anymore. So I've gone away from more sports. I do them on occasion. But if their commercial comes on or if something comes on, just change the channel or shut it off.
Yeah.
And really that's what I tell my patients when their anxiety is so high or they're so worried about what's going on. Stop scrolling through Facebook. Stop listening to it on the radio. Stop watching it on the TV. Like, what's happening. That's all you need to know.
Yep.
Don't get caught up in the details or caught up in some research article that is using fear to try to get people into action.
One of my biggest frustrations is going into a doctor's office and in the waiting room, they have the news on. Right. You're already coming in. You're possibly not feeling well.
White coat syndrome.
Right. And now you're being over bombarded with more stress related things right in front of you. So I made a commitment that years ago in my private practice, when I put up a TV in my waiting room, I only put on, like, at that time it was DVDs. So I had, like, The Secret, and I would rotate it between, like, The Secret and Boy Meets World episodes. Right, just for levity, and they'll just for like that, like, and Saved by the Bell, and like all those like timely and 90s awesome, like, fun, entertaining shows, because at least could be some laughter in the background when you're coming in for therapy. And then when I hooked up an Apple TV to it in my new office, my former new office that I created a YouTube playlist, and it was with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it was mind body stuff and NET and TED Talks and stuff like that. So if I can get them for 10-15 minutes and at least maybe change their mindset while they're waiting, I can indoctrinate them.
Yes.
Right. I should be getting them prepped for what they're going to be doing with me. So I have this like 30 video long playlist that would just constantly, be on rotation, as I never had the news on. And I always wanted to make sure that mindset was there from the second they walk into my office.
And I'm completely virtual, and I've been virtual for about 2 years now. So I was virtual before it was cool to be virtual.
Yeah.
But the way I always start off my conversations with people is they have to tell me something that they're grateful for. And sometimes it's like, they have to think about it, but then it completely changes their mood.
Yeah.
As soon as they start saying, I'm grateful for X, Y, Z. And even I've been using this in practice a lot for myself the last month or so, because I just became so complacent about life and where I was. And it was starting to affect me and affect my relationship with my kids and my husband, and just being short-tempered and not patient like I usually am. So every night I write down something I'm grateful for, and it's really helped me. And then I love it with patients because it completely changes the mood of the conversation we're about to have.
Yeah.
Simply stating something you're grateful for. That's it.
Yeah, which is huge, especially when you're not feeling well consistently and you have no answer and you've not been given an answer by other practitioners. So when they come to someone like you and I, they've probably already been to multiple people with multiple possible diagnoses or no diagnoses. It can go either way. So so let's get more into that. Right. So let's talk about, I don't know. Do we want to start off with adrenal stuff? Do we want to start off with, I know one of the things that I would love to talk about is there's, from the women's health perspective, is all the pressure that they're under, even when they're right. And then the pressure of parenting, the pressure of getting pregnant and all that stuff. So I'll let you start where you want to start and let everybody bask in the knowledge.
So I love labs. Numbers never lie. However, when you constantly get told that your labs are normal, why do you feel like this? Why can you not get pregnant? Why did you have a miscarriage? Why can I not make dinner at night? Why does so-and-so able to keep their house clean and manage everything that they're doing, and I can't? Yeah. And so many times when you keep getting told your labs are normal, you're fine, go take an antidepressant, go take an anti-anxiety pill, it starts to get messed with their heads, especially women. And I've had a lot of women say, well, then what's wrong with me? And they place it as a burden upon themselves, especially when it comes to infertility and the miscarriage struggle, because so oftentimes somebody looks at the hormones of a woman and says, well, then that's your problem. You can't get pregnant until you lose weight. I guarantee you she's tried every diet under the sun and it hasn't, quote, worked. She hasn't lost that weight. For example, I had a patient, she was on like an 18-month infertility journey, dropped thousands of dollars, and eventually somewhere along the lines, she got diagnosed with endometrial cancer. And your endometrium is the lining of your uterus. That's what you slough off every month of your period. And so it's now cancerous. And I'm thinking, in the last 12 months, how many injections have you had? How many hormones have been placed in your body? What is your body dealing with? Like literally, your fertility treatment probably gave you cancer. And that's something that we don't want to think about, nor is it ever thought about. And if it is, like, oh no, that's not possible. Fertility treatments are the only way to go, right? So when it comes to infertility and miscarriage, let me rewind 3 years ago. On December 3rd, 2017, I was 20 weeks pregnant. I had a 9-month-old baby at this time. Yep, I'm one of those people who got pregnant short months after labor and delivery. And everything was fine. My first pregnancy was absolute torture. I was throwing up for 7 months, and I actually became a mom the same week I became a doctor. So I was managing all of the school on top of this pregnancy, which was just making me very sick. And then the second pregnancy came, and I was devastated. I cried and cried and cried because there was no way I could do another 9 months of this. On top of, I'm supposed to start my practice in a month. Yeah. And now I'm pregnant with another baby. So it was just a lot of turmoil in my mind. But now, after what happened 3 years ago, I'm very, very grateful. Getting pregnant and staying pregnant and having a baby means much more after you've experienced a loss. And it doesn't matter if you lose a baby at 6 weeks in, if you lose a baby at 20 weeks in, it's still part of your heart that gets broken because it's a body that you're carrying. You're excited to have a baby. Your life's about to change. Who knows, you've been trying for however many years to have a baby, and now all of a sudden they're gone. For me, it was the most common avenue was the number 3 avenue of a miscarriage. So let's talk miscarriage, because so oftentimes we have a miscarriage, and I know I did this. I immediately asked, what did I do wrong? And usually it has nothing, 99% of the time, it has nothing to do with what I did. The number one reason is that the genes don't mesh. That's the most common form of a miscarriage, is that body literally aborts it because the genes don't mesh. Right. The number 2 problem is low progesterone. Progesterone's supposed to spike when you get pregnant. It's one of the ways your body knows that you're pregnant. And if it doesn't, we can have a miscarriage. The third instance was what happened to me, a stressor. A stressful event caused my pregnancy to terminate early. I got sick over Thanksgiving weekend. Had the flu. It went rampant throughout the entire extended family, my immediate family, to the point where we all got it. We were all throwing up for 48 hours, couldn't keep anything down. Here I am 20 weeks pregnant, and I'm just telling myself, what's going to be okay. We're going to get through this and it'll be okay. Well, Monday came, and Monday I started seeing some warning signs that things weren't right, but I didn't know that they were that wrong. So I went through the week thinking it's gonna be fine. I'll just get to my 20-week appointment, and I'll tell her what's going on, and it will be okay. You don't want to realize what's going on because you don't want to accept the results of it at the time. So the night before my appointment, I didn't make it to my appointment. I was woken up by my water breaking. There was water all over the bed, and I just thought, I'll go clean up. I'll go to the bathroom, clean up, change the clothes. I'll just sleep it off. It's going to be okay. Got back into bed, contractions started. That's when I was like, honey, I wake up. You got to take me to the ER. We're in trouble. So by the time we got to the ER, I'm bleeding everywhere. it's just a mess. And so they take me straight into the back room when it was probably less than 30 minutes later, contraction after contraction after contraction. And at this point, I had never experienced a moment in my life where I felt like my body had betrayed me. And so many times I hear women say, I don't even know who I am in my own skin anymore. Like my body has betrayed me and I don't know what to do about it. And now when people tell me that, I'm like, I get it. I totally understand. When someone says, I've had a miscarriage, but it was only like 8 weeks. So what? You still had a miscarriage. And now my response is much more empathetic rather than what it was beforehand was, oh, that's okay. You'll be fine the next time. Just sleep more. Now I get it. And for those of you who haven't experienced a miscarriage or who have, or you know of somebody who has, the best things that you can say are just words of encouragement. Don't ever offer advice. That's like the worst thing you could do to somebody. They don't want to know what you want to say. I guarantee you they've searched Google a million times. So this happened in my life, and I would say about 30 minutes, after arriving in the ER, one of those contractions hit and my baby came out. And I could just feel it. So I started bawling. I had no idea what to do. Blood is everywhere. I can't control anything my body is doing. And finally, at the end of the day, I was in complete shock and I didn't know what to do. Here I have this little baby. She's the size of my hand. They asked me, okay, what do you want to take her home and have a funeral? Like, what would you like to do? You don't plan for those kind of things.
Yeah.
And in the moment, it's like an emotional decision. And with my husband's history, he didn't want anything to do with it. It brought up a lot of negative emotions with him. And so we just decided to let the hospital do their thing. And 3 years later now, December 3rd was the anniversary. So just a couple of days ago, that I wish I would have done things differently, in the fact that I wish I would have had more of a memory of it. Because literally, what I do have is they took her, I think it's Utah Share organization, took her body and they gave me like imprints of her hands and her feet. And that's really all I have left, knowing that I do have an angel around me at all times. But I would have gone back and done things differently. And I know other women and other moms say that too, and it's okay. We totally can. But the emotions that come along with it, they're going to hit you at any time, any point of the year. You can go to the grocery store and it can flare up. You can, just be laying in your bed thinking at night and it can flare up. Let your emotions roll. Yeah. You're huge into emotions doing the NET stuff. And if we don't let them come up to the surface and if we don't let them out, they're going to just hang out inside of us. And eventually down the road, they're going to cause physical symptoms.
Yeah. It sounds, the process sounds very similar in a different way. It's different, but the emotional process and the way you're describing it is that it's a post-traumatic stressor. And like you're saying, if it can still pop up no matter what, no matter where, you don't know what can trigger and bring you back there, right? That's an unresolved stress pattern, like you said, and it can affect both your emotional and your physical well-being. And I do want people, and maybe you can talk about this, but I want people to understand like how common, unfortunately, this process is.
Yeah, you never think it's going to happen to you until it does. I never once in my wildest dreams thought I was going to lose this pregnancy. To me, I got pregnant and it's going to end up with the baby at 9 months old, healthy pregnancy, healthy mommy. You don't plan on it. You don't think about it. But here's the sad part. 1 in 4 pregnancies, 25% of pregnancies end early in miscarriage or stillbirths.
Yeah.
1 in 7 couples struggle with infertility. So I guarantee somebody who's had a miscarriage, if not more. I guarantee somebody who is struggling with infertility, whether they've been verbal about it or not. And that 1 in 7 number, I would say it's higher because people don't. That's only those who have been diagnosed with infertility, and you have to struggle with infertility for at least 12 months to get the diagnosis. Right. And that's if you even go to your doctor or to your gynecologist or to a fertility clinic, like somebody has to give you that diagnosis. But more people are suffering in silence, and they're suffering for 8, 9, 10 months when every month that period hits, or if you have PCOS and your period goes 100 days long, now after day 14, you're literally getting screwed in the head because you think you're pregnant, and then all of a sudden the test result comes back negative. The period comes in, a month or two late. It's just these mind games that people are going through, and they're doing it in silence.
Yeah.
And so many people are suffering, and it's just crazy to me. So we've covered what causes miscarriage. Would you care if we covered what causes infertility?
Yeah, because what I was just going to bring up was secondary infertility, right? And I believe that's the right phrasing, where it's you might already have a child and then you have a difficulty getting pregnant again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
a big, in a lot of communities with, especially in cultural communities that have pressure to have big families, where they might
Utah,
have had,
where I
right,
am.
right, or the Jewish
Mhm.
community and certain, more Orthodox Jewish communities and any religious community, right? It's you might have one or two children, and then it's right. It might be difficulty to conceive a post, and then there's all that. What's going on? Why aren't you having more children? Right? All that stuff is there, and it could be still related to the medical or biochemistry thing. Yeah, and I definitely, I definitely want to talk about that, and I want you to talk a little bit more about the PCOS process, because I know there's so many people who maybe have not been many women who've not been diagnosed with PCOS and don't really, the hand-in-hand correlation to that in this process, especially again, stress handling, biochemistry, all that stuff is all
For sure. So when it comes to infertility, there's three things. And before we jump into that real fast, I just want to say, if you like you said, women can have 2 or 3 kids and then all of a sudden not be able to get pregnant, or they've really, really fought for those 2 or 3 kids, and now they're fighting even harder for the 4th or 5th. So just because somebody has kids doesn't mean it was an easy journey. It doesn't mean that their journey that they're currently on is easy as well. So just don't assume, don't judge, don't say things to people that you shouldn't be saying. For example, I had when my little boy was 2 years old, somebody said to me at a party, "Hey, well, how old's your little boy?" I said 2. She was like, "Well, aren't you due for another one?"
right.
Actually, he lost his little sister a year ago. Dun, dun, dun. Like, don't say it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So when it comes to infertility, the most common avenue of infertility is PCOS. And that is polycystic ovarian syndrome, where you have a cyst on your ovaries. And the way the Western medicine approach is to it is it's incomplete. They have a great start, but they're not getting all of it. And if you get diagnosed with PCOS, they're going to give you metformin. Metformin is the blood sugar control pharmaceutical. I use my own version of it. Natural version is Sinulin, but that is the first place that you start with PCOS. But it's only part of the puzzle. And that's why so many women get the diagnosis, they get on metformin, they might lose 10 pounds, they might feel a little bit better, but it's still not completing the puzzle of my cycles still aren't regular. And when it comes to birth control, please, 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 please don't use birth control as a Band-Aid. When I was starting to look into birth control, I was terrified of it. Remember, I'm 18 years old on 9 different medications, and in my mind, birth control causes infertility. When in reality, it's not the birth control. It's the fact that birth control was used to cover up hormone chaos. And as soon as you take the birth control away, the hormone chaos returns. And then the infertility is a result, because the hormones were never fixed to begin with. They were just plastered with some managed birth control where you can put it in for a month or take it for a month and then take it out, and now you have a period kind of thing.
And that goes back to what you were describing before about the why behind and what makes functional medicine different, is that in a lot of medical perspectives, they'll put a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid to cover up another Band-Aid to make sure that the side effects from the third Band-Aid is being taken care of by the fifth Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, my 9 different medications were mitigated by actually fixing the acid reflux and getting dairy out of my diet.
Right, which is going back to the causes and the systemic cause behind all of it, the root causes behind of it, which is a very different lens. But it's so funny how simple and practical it is, and it doesn't take that much more time than a regular doctor. Sometimes once you see a pattern in someone, it's not going to take any longer time than an average doctor's visit. But just unfortunately, the average doctor are not trained to look at it through this lens, and why functional medicine is having an uprising right now amongst practitioners.
Right. Yep. So PCOS, the first instance is metformin, blood sugar control. The second big problem with PCOS that doctors aren't trained to figure out is the high testosterone. This is when women are like, I exercise, I eat right, and it's still the weight's not coming off. Or I have to shave the little mustache every day because I've got the facial hair. Or my periods, are sometimes they're 90 days apart, sometimes they're 15 days apart. I have no idea. And the only way I can figure out my period is to use the birth control. But now I want to get pregnant, so I can't use birth control. It's just this mess. So the two things I commonly fix with the PCOS is one, the blood sugar control. Now, are you a fan of intermittent fasting?
So I'm doing more and more research on it. My chiropractor here is a huge fan of intermittent fasting. He's also a pretty well-known player in the applied kinesiology world.
The AK world. That's where I got trained into.
Nice.
I'm not a fan of intermittent fasting when it comes to PCOS. And for myself, like if I go 4 or 5 hours too long without eating, I start getting lightheaded. And I start to get those low blood sugar signs where it's like, okay, you need to go get some food. When it comes to PCOS and balancing blood sugar, I have 3 dietary rules. The first dietary rule is to never skip a meal. And I know as a busy mom, like when I went from a brick and mortar practice to a virtual practice and I'm at home, I'm thinking, food's always upstairs. Yeah, right. I'm worse at eating now home than I was with the brick and mortar practice having like a set schedule. It's tough. And you have to sit down and be disciplined on yourself and say, go eat food. Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes and go eat some food.
And chew it and digest it.
Yeah, that's
right.
the other thing. I'm not very good at chewing
not
it
inhale
either.
It. Right.
The second one would be when you have, like, say you want to go grab an apple for a snack. Grab some peanut butter or some almond butter or something that has fat and protein with it. So when you're eating a carb, be sure you add something else to it. Grab a handful of nuts. Like that's really easy too. Then the third rule is you got to have a hearty breakfast. Breakfast is, to me, the most important meal of the day. If you can make that meal, not cereal, you're talking, get some proteins, get some fats. For me, I always cook eggs, some form of eggs. My little 3-year-old boy loves his bacon omelets. So we have a bacon omelet probably every other day. We do bacon, sausage, eggs, hash browns. I make time to cook breakfast because that sets us up for success for the rest of the day. If you're grabbing a toast, if you're grabbing cereal, if you're grabbing something that just has sugar, you're setting yourself up to fail. You're going to crave more sugar throughout the day. You're going to be hungrier throughout the day. And you're going to think, well, why can't I just fight this? It's not your ability to fight. It's that you told your body first thing in the morning, I want sugar. I ate sugar. Now I need more sugar. And I'm just going to keep wanting more sugar. And I'm going to feel more dehydrated too because of that choice you made beginning of the day. So that's like the very most important choice you can make. What are you going to eat for breakfast? Not what you want to wear.
Yeah.
Got to eat what you're eating for breakfast, right?
And I also know that people should be aiming at a certain amount of protein in grams based on their body weight, and they should experiment with that because what I'm understanding, what I'm researching, and what I'm experiencing also for myself is that there's an amount of protein in grams that you should have per meal that should allow you to get through to the next meal and feel like a rock star without that blood sugar crash, without the sleepiness, especially those who have that in the mid-afternoon, post-lunch coma, right? But there should be there's a percentage, and I'm not sure if you know that equation of what it is, but like I know
my husband would. He's a bodybuilder, but I don't know it.
Yeah, so I know for me, like I was told between 15 and 20 grams of protein per meal for myself, and to find that sweet spot that'll carry me from one to the next. And so people can start looking when you're talking about breakfast to make sure that there is a good, substantial, healthy protein, right? With you said with the carb, if you're going to do the carb versus
Yeah. Really, what's really popular right now is the keto diet.
Yeah.
It has been popular for over a year now, but that's because they're eliminating so many of those carbs, those sugars. That messes with the blood sugar, that messes with your head, the whole cascade. Yeah. So that's the first part when it comes to the PCOS. The second part is, what do you do with the high testosterone? How do you get that down? Now, if you were to look at hormones, testosterone gets converted into estrogen. And your body needs some tools, needs some supplies of specific things to help that conversion process. And two of those big tools are DIM and IC3. So one of the supplements I use, it's called Thermocrin. It has these components in it that's going to help your body go from high testosterone, mitigate that, get it lower, and turn it into estrogen. Now you lose the weight. Now your hormones, your cycles are more regulated. And now you don't have to worry about the facial hair in women. That's the missing piece of PCOS, that the metformin only takes a piece out of. But when it comes to medical world, they see low estrogen, high testosterone. They're just going to give you estrogen. That's what they know. Whereas if you go back to, okay, if this is just this chemistry process, because that's all it is, testosterone, what does testosterone need? What does the body need to make T and turn it into E? And then you just give the body those products, right? So that's an easy way to conquer PCOS. And what I've seen is when you do the protocols right and you take the right supplements and you manage the diet really well, it can be as soon as 3 months. You go from infertility to pregnancy. It can be as easy, like it can take 6 months. I've never seen it even take up to a year. And I've worked with an individual who had IVF 4 times. She was 24 years old, had cysts all over her ovaries. She's pregnant in 6 months because we literally just fixed her hormones. We weren't trying to shove chemicals or, take out her egg and fertilize it and then put it back in her unhealthy body. We got her body healthy. And from there, it took care of itself.
I've also heard for years, whether it's from clients or people I've met, that they've been taught that PCOS is not reversible and not healable.
Yes. Yeah.
I've gotten into friendly arguments with them because in the lens like we're talking about, it's not healable, right? It's not the lens that you and I were talking about, but the other lens, right? It doesn't, because it's like, no, we're just gonna have to figure this out and we'll do the best we can. And
it's a diagnosis that goes against you for the rest of your life. Good luck managing it.
Right. So I want people to hear that like if you're listening to this or someone who has this, right, the PCOS process can be changed. Most of these things, and that's the beauty of the study of epigenetics, right? Through the proper nutrition, through the right supplementation, through exercise, through mindfulness, through the right therapy, you can actually have a change in your genetic expression. And that's where that field with Dr. Bruce Lipton in Biology Belief, which is an amazing book. And if you're not a book reader, just go watch his YouTube video and save yourself the time, right? All of his YouTube videos on epigenetics and changing your genetic expression and predisposition to a lot of these things. But that all comes from everything that you and I are talking about.
Yeah. I mean, once your body goes through enough, it turns on the gene, you can help turn it off and get your body back into healthy form if you do everything right. That's what I try to help people with is let's just in fact, I call it beyond the diagnosis. I don't care what your diagnosis is. I could care less. What I want to know is what's happening inside your body and how do we fix it?
Yeah.
The diagnosis just tells me what symptoms you're presenting with, what symptoms your body feels like presenting with. Something's going wrong. Let's just figure out what's going wrong and fix it.
Yeah. And it's literally like you're just finding, it's so succinct. When you look at things, there's been times and I tell my clients, like, I'm not certified in this. I've taken workshops. I'm not giving you any medical advice. I'm just pointing out things that I want you to go back to either, I'll refer you to a functional medicine practitioner, or I want you to go back to your doctor and ask them on these things. You're saying my lab is normal, but why is this number higher? And if I look at it from this other lens, this is indicating possibly a thyroid issue, and you're telling me my thyroid is fine. And how many people are misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed with a thyroid related concern when they're told they're within normal limits, and how much of everything we've been talking about, right, is connected back to a lot of this.
Yeah. The way thyroid could be a whole episode in and of itself, but think about it. If you've been told that your thyroid labs are normal, you're like, my hair's falling out. I can't lose weight. I have no energy. I have all the signs of thyroid. Then why is it normal? The normal lab range is literally like trying to find your favorite restaurant somewhere between California and New York. Good luck. Whereas the optimal lab range, what we've kind of been alluding to, is more, for me, it would be more like, okay, your favorite restaurant is in the Wasatch Front. Your favorite restaurant is in Miami. Your favorite restaurant is in Chicago. Like, it narrows it down so much that now you can go from, I don't feel good, to now I'm back to being myself, versus a disease and feeling healthy.
Yeah.
If you actually want normal labs. If you don't have normal labs, they're going to say, oh, you have liver disease, kidney disease, thyroid disease, like, name it. They'll just put a name on it and give you a pill. So you want the normal labs. But the difference is the normal labs versus the ideal lab range. That means if you're in the ideal range, you feel good. If you're not in the ideal range, you feel like crap. Just not crappy enough to get a diagnosis.
Right. And then I noticed also, one of the things that I find when my clients on average do a comprehensive metabolic panel, which is the average blood test that most people take, and they do a thyroid test on that, they're only testing two of the many.
Or one of the many.
Right. But yeah, I haven't seen more than two or three of the many on the average, and it doesn't give you an adequate wide view of everything that's going on.
Yeah, I tell people you're missing puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Your puzzle can't be complete with these puzzle pieces missing. You got to have all the puzzle pieces.
Right.
And for me, the puzzle pieces would be TSH, free T4, free T3, TPO antibodies, TG antibodies. You can throw in reverse T3 there. But if you're looking at, okay, I'm going to my doctor, I'm going to go get some thyroid panels, what should I ask for?
Yeah.
And I will email people. I'll send Facebook messages to people. They'll reach out. Hey, I got an appointment in a couple of weeks. What lab should I ask for? And I send them a list. Like CBC, man, I just go off. The more, the better. The more puzzle pieces you can get, the better. Right. And when it comes to infertility, let's just talk on this one instance because it often gets missed. So you have PCOS, then you have endometriosis. Endometriosis is the heavy, painful periods. It can even be painful with intercourse. So real quick, we'll just know that endometriosis starts with the liver because the estrogen levels are usually high. And estrogen has to go through the liver, get broken down, and then eliminated. If the liver is so busy dealing with other crap, the estrogen is just going to hang out for a little bit, go back into the body, and now your estrogen keeps getting higher and higher and higher and higher. Your periods keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and there's really no answers besides birth control. Birth control usually makes it worse because it's got estrogen in it, and it's just compounding the effect. So if you have endometriosis, start with the liver. The third thing would be this thing we call infections, a low-grade hidden infection. And you're actually one of the very few people I've talked to about this infection type thing who would understand it, right?
Right. And they can also be called subclinical infections, depending on the languaging of the practitioner.
Yeah, I call them hidden low-grade infections because if you were to go tell your doctor that you have an infection, they're going to laugh at you and think you're crazy and think I'm crazy. The difference is we're going to take that normal lab range and condense it into a smaller lab range. Now it's like, okay, I might have a little bit of a virus in me, or the virus might be a little bit active, but it's not active enough to create a positive test. So if you go back, if you're struggling with infertility, if you're struggling with chronic fatigue, if you're struggling with whatever the case may be, and you've tried so many different avenues, chances are there might be a hidden infection inside you that's causing your body to stop thriving and simply survive. And the way you can identify that is this one marker called WBC, white blood cells. It's within the CBC. I guarantee you, if you've taken blood work, you have this lab. It's the number one labs every doctor takes to just rule out anything and everything. And I also guarantee that this lab you've been told is normal. It might be normal, but it's not ideal. Okay, so go check out your labs. If that WBC marker is less than 5 or greater than 8, there is a hidden infection that your body is constantly fighting. And that is actually a big time factor in infertility.
Yeah. And it's so simple, and it's right in front of our faces so many times. And I love doing this. I love doing exactly what you're doing. I've done this with a handful of my clients. I'm like, just go get your labs for me. What's going on? Like, I want to get your vitamin B12 check. I want to see, especially 1 out of 10 people who have vitamin B deficiency will have neuropsychiatric related symptoms, which a lot of people don't know. So right off the bat, let's, make sure you're getting your vitamin B, especially if those are they're drinking and they're a partier part of their phase of life, or they're alcoholics. The vitamin B is a stress handling, but it gets deficient when the body's exposed to too much alcohol. So I know it's something that goes correlation between that. I want to add something that's so important that I want people to take away on top of what you just said, is that when you are working with a practitioner such as yourself, and you get sent to a doctor to do labs, a lot of times they'll tell the patient, we're not sure if we'll cover that lab. We're not sure if so I want to tell people, this is the words you need to say. Don't worry about it. I'll pay for it if it's not covered. Yes. 99% of the time, I haven't seen anybody in all the years, including myself, who has had to use those words to my practitioners who think I'm crazy for asking for all these things, and said to them, that's not your problem.
That's true. You're the one with the money in your pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know if your insurance will cover that. Not your problem. I'll pay for it if it does. I haven't had one lab that I've had to pay for out of network or in addition to what was covered, and they've sent back, and I'm talking about like random stuff like the
MTHFR.
Yeah, the MTHFR, right? That testing for that, and genetic testing, and some other things over the years. Nothing has been denied by my insurance. So I want everybody who's listening, if you're going to go and you're going to ask, you're going to work with a functional medicine practitioner, whether they're a chiropractor, nutritionist, but someone who specializes in functional medicine, you're going to work with Dr. Kylie. Your doctor is just responsible for writing that script. You're responsible to say, don't worry about it. Anything that comes out of network or out of pocket, I'll cover it. And your job is to make sure that you get a copy of your labs. Don't just let them say everything is within normal limits, we didn't find anything. Get a copy of your labs and start keeping it as a folder, because when you're working with practitioners, right, every 3 to 6 months, they may want you to get new labs, and you want to have it right. And you might want to, you're going to start wanting to build a landscape of labs. So this morning, a good friend of mine who's a chiropractor, I was just checking in with him on stuff, and he's like, "Oh, send me your labs and your an assessment from one of the companies that we partner with, Designs for Health, or Apex Energetics, and they have a whole great questionnaire, and send me those questionnaires." I'm like, oh, I have to find it from 6 months ago or from a year ago, and so you can see a landscape over time of what's going on with the symptoms that correlates with the blood lab. So I want everybody to make sure that when you're going to go out, if you're struggling with any of this or anything else that's going on, get a copy of your lab, but tell your practitioner, don't worry about it. Put it in there. Put it in my script, and I'll deal with it if it shows up as a bill. And it's not going to be as expensive as I think it's going to be, even if it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And the more numbers you can get, I mean, ultimately it's priceless. Yeah. Because if you can have the right person looking at those labs, you're going to save yourself not only years of not feeling good or years of infertility treatments or whatever the case may be, but thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars as well. Yeah. Simply by getting a few more additional labs.
Right. And the only kickback that I've ever heard is for the thyroid panel, is that they're like, well, I have to send you to an endocrinologist to order those. In other words, an endocrinologist has to order those for you, which I don't know if is necessarily true. I think any doctor can enter any labs. I think they're just CYAing themselves. But if you push enough, my guess is, or you might need to find a new practitioner, a new general practitioner who is okay taking those things and interviewing them before that. What is your, I had a doctor who was he was my childhood counselor when I was 3 years old. That's how long I've known him. And I used to tell him coming in what I want, and he used to roll his eyes. He's like, oh, you're crazy. I'm like, and then when I left his practice, and someone recommended, was looking for a practitioner on Facebook, and I recommended someone else, he messaged me. He's like, how come you didn't send him to me? I'm like, here's why. Because you laughed at me in my face. And when I would come in saying, this is what I want, and this is what I'm finding, and this is my area of people who are more experts at this.
Or they pull out Google right in front of you and start Googling your symptoms to see what's going on.
Yeah. So it's, nothing shows up. So that's part of the challenges. And even myself as a practitioner, knowing an advocate, the most dangerous thing, unfortunately, to MDs sometimes are self-advocate informed clients. So, I want to challenge people in there to make sure
but people are having to do the self-advocacy because they're not getting answers when they do go into the doctors.
Yeah.
And the way I get labs is I if they don't have them in their possession, it's always easier if they have them in their possession. You can pull medical records. And by law, doctors have to have medical records for the previous 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, nobody goes through and eliminates their stuff. And if they do, props to them. But I pull records as far as they go back. So you can get the full story. And people will say, well, and I ask them on their calls, when was the last time you felt good? Oh, I think it was like 7 years ago. Well, what happened 7 years ago? Something usually always happens.
Yeah.
But you can trace the history from before, when they felt good, then what happened, and then you can see it all in the numbers. If you have it, your doctor has it because they have to have it by law. And you just have to get it. You just have to go ask for it. So it might not even cost you anything because you've already paid for it. You've already donated the blood. You've already given the time, spent the energy. Just go get it. Just go get access to all of them.
Right. And that helps because it gives, again, a massive landscape over a period of time to see what's been going on and fluctuating, if there is anything fluctuating, or if it's relatively stable, or if it's actually getting worse. And you can see that charted out right in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff. Numbers never lie.
Cool. Yeah, the numbers never lie. So just to wrap things up, so we talked a lot about today. We talked about infertility. We talked about stress. We talked about thyroid. We talked about vitamin D. So, we'll put in the show notes the research on the adequate levels of vitamin D. There's an amazing study that was done by, I believe, I think this is Boston University School of Medicine, about adequate levels of vitamin D reduction reduces complications amongst those who are afflicted with the pandemic, with the virus that's going around. And it says that you have to be at a minimum of 30 to have this. So we really want to make sure that people are taking they're getting their vitamin D like you suggested before. But anything below 30, if you look at your labs, you want to immediately talk to someone, a practitioner in your licensed healthcare practitioner. Yeah. And that's what they're saying is, so the higher you get, the better off you're going to be. And that was with patients older than 40 years old, that these patients who were vitamin D sufficient were 51.5% less likely to die from the infection compared to patients who were vitamin D deficient or insufficient below 30. So that's at the low end of the chart, right? So can you imagine?
That 30 would be the very low end border of the quote normal range.
Right. And I've had clients with 17.
Yeah.
Of vitamin D. So, and lived here in South Florida and ran and goes running. So, we knew there was other stuff going on, and, autoimmune stuff and depression and, and vitamin B was low. And so, right. So all these things, so those of you who are out there and you're like fascinated by this and you're like, okay, I never knew I can look at these numbers from a different perspective. There's a whole entirely different framework and lens in which this can be interpreted that can help you in such an insanely simple and practical way. And there are amazing practitioners out there like Dr. Kylie, who is doing these type of things. So I know that as our time wraps up, I just want to give everybody your website. It's Dr. Kylie, Kylie, Burton, BURTON.com. And there's so much good stuff on her website. Not only that, but she also has her own podcast called Beyond the Diagnosis, which I recommend. And well, in the next little bit, we're going to be doing an interview swap. And
you're going to come join me.
Yeah, we're going to talk about neuro-emotional technique and a bunch of other mind-body healing and probably some other functional medicine stuff. But
yeah, I always tell people if I knew 5 years ago I would be treating emotions like I am now, I would have laughed at your face. Right. But you have to treat emotions if you're going to get physically better too.
Yeah. So those of you who want more information, especially as it refers to women's health, then Dr. Kylie is for sure your go-to resource on this. And I'm so glad we connected, because when I saw your profile in the podcasting connection world, I was like, this has to happen. So thank you.
Yeah, you might as well have a degree next to your name with like a DC, because you know everything DC knows, and probably even more.
I can't adjust, and I'm not licensed to, so I want to make it clear that anybody who hears me talking about these things, we were joking before that people who meet me who are chiropractors assume within 5 minutes, if I don't tell them that I'm a therapist, that I'm actually a chiropractor based on my conversations and research that I've been doing over the last couple of years. But I definitely attribute that to my amazing friends / now family members. They've become family in the neuroemotional technique community, and a good percentage of them are chiropractors. So I sit at the dust of their feet and drink in their words thirstily and absorb as much as I can, because I want to be a great resource for my clients, no matter what. And I think we all need to be that as practitioners, to know things a little bit outside of our realm, so we know who to refer to for that.
Yeah. I have a mentor who's definitely taken me from point A to point X. I don't say point B, because point B is what I knew, where I thought I wanted to go.
Yeah.
He introduced me to a whole another world that I didn't even know existed, like this whole idea of running a practice online, and it's
awesome.
really perfect.
So good. So maybe next time we get together, we'll talk more about the thyroid, because that's a big, happy place to go to, and we'll definitely reconnect in the near future. So again, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And guys, again, please check out her podcast. Again, it's, we just talked about it. It's Beyond the Diagnosis. That's it. And if you got any value, and if you know anybody who would value or benefit from today's episode, please share it with them. Also, we highly benefit from taking 3 minutes, going to iTunes, leaving us a starred and written review on the podcast. Not only does it give us some feedback, give me some feedback. Well, you can do this for Dr. Kylie's when you listen to hers as well, but it gives us feedback on how we're doing, what you got value out of. But two, it helps us get found in front of other people as well, right? It helps boost the listenership with the more reviews we get, because that's telling people that there's value being offered. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can do so. There's been some recent Instagram changes. My account got hacked or shut down. Unfortunately, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So by this time, hopefully it will be resolved by then, but you can follow me on my secondary Instagram account, which is linked directly to the podcast, which is You Winning Life. And again, thank you again for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thanks for listening to the You Winning Life podcast. If you are ready to minimize your personal and professional struggles and maximize your potential, we would love it if you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at You Winning Life.